but right now, this is a great tool that we have in hand to help small businesses navigate short flows in working capital based on the circumstances and loss of revenue that they're experiencing. Last Thursday, the SBA administrator signed off on a disaster declaration for the state of Illinois, the entire state of Illinois. So every small business that's eligible for this program can apply for the program. This program is also available to private nonprofits. So it's a wide-ranging program that is used for working capital, used to pay ongoing business expenses. Through this program, you can receive loans of up to $2 million with interest rates at 3.75% for small business, 2.75% for nonprofits, terms up to 30 years, and the first payment's deferred for a year. So give you a little window of time before you actually have to start repaying the loan, give everybody a chance to basically get a breather and be able to get back in hopefully bluer skies as we come out of this. To be an eligible business, a couple things that you need to keep in mind. You need to be a small business. And what we use the term small is basically it's a revenue-based model typically. So a service business might have a max revenue of $7 million to be considered small. But for your manufacturers and your wholesalers, it's a employee-based number. So manufacturers with 500 or less employees, they can have up to 500 employees. For wholesalers, it can be up to 100 employees. So very broad range there. And most businesses in the U.S. qualify as small under these standards. You can use these loan funds for fixed debt, payroll, accounts payable. Basically, all those bills that could have been paid had the disaster not occurred. And again, it's really intended to help you keep the lights on, keep your employees engaged and working, and pay those bills like leases and other things that you know you need to pay month in, month out. What we're going to look for is basically you fill out an application online. It's important to note that this is an SBA program, so you're going to SBA to secure a loan. Most of SBA's normal programs are done done in partnership with the lending community, where they are the lender of record and we guarantee loans that they make. In this case, SBA is the lender of record and we pull funds from the U.S. Treasury. After you apply, what we're going to do is we're going to look at your credit history, just like any other credit decision that is made for somebody seeking funding. We're going to look at the repayment ability of your business. So do you have the cash flow to support those payments downstream? And we're going to look to see if you've suffered working capital losses due to the disaster. So a couple of the key things that we're going to look at. I want to know, one of the things we encourage everybody to do is before you apply for a loan program, really any loan program, but in particular this program, check your credit, look to see if there's anything that you can find, if there's anything on there that's derogatory that you can clear up because it's a mistake or whatever, to make sure you do all that so you know where you stand when you go into this process. From the standpoint of collateral, most loans require collateral. In this case, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, only loans over $25,000 require collateral. And even when in over $25,000, while we will take collateral if there's not collateral available, so in other words, you own a building and the equity in the building is fully collateralized by your primary lender, we'll take a second position on that, but it's not going to be a reason for us to decline your loan. As I mentioned, this loan program goes directly from the U.S. Treasury. So you'll come to SBA, sba.gov/disaster, and there's a huge red button that says apply for a loan or apply for disaster relief. Go ahead and click that, and that'll take you to our portal to apply online. There's no cost to apply. If there's a program that comes down the pipe that offers you a better opportunity to do what you need to do, there's no obligation if you are approved to take the loan if it's offered. So it's important to note that, one of the things we're telling everybody is to go ahead and put your application in as soon as possible so you get in the queue. And the program itself, it's basically first in, first out. There's no buckets of money for Illinois versus Wisconsin versus Indiana. It's looked at unilaterally across the United States. So the sooner you can get into the pipeline, the sooner you get closer to a decision and then potentially to that disbursement of funds to help you offset your working capital needs. Let's see. The other kind of key piece is some of you may already have SBA loans. You may have maxed out the guaranteed portion of what you're allowed to take from a conventional SBA loan dollar amount, which is $5 million. The disaster loan program is considered completely separate from that. So even if you've maxed out your SBA loan program guarantees on the conventional side, you're still eligible to apply for the economic injury disaster loan. As far as the filing process, I don't want to get too much into the weeds on it, but it's really streamlined. We try to limit the amount of information you're going to have to provide up front. So we ask for a loan application. We ask for the ability to pull up tax transcripts for any owner over 20%. We want business federal income tax returns, scheduled liabilities, personal financial statements, again, for any owner over 20%. That's it. You may get asked for more information, and we're going to share the slide deck. I won't get into too much of the weeds on the additional filing items, but know that we don't ask for a lot up front. That said, it definitely behooves you to have personal tax returns, business tax returns, profit and loss statements and balance sheets, so you've got that information available in case the loan processor who's looking at your application needs more information. There are some ineligible entities, including agricultural enterprises, religious organizations, nonprofits, charitable organizations, gambling concerns, casinos, and racetracks. I put this up here to say that the group of ineligible entities is relatively small. So, we are encouraging people, if you think that you may qualify and you are able to go ahead and go through the application process, then please do. I mentioned how to apply. For those of you that maybe want to go with the paper route, that is still available. So you can download the paper documents, you can fill them out, and then you can send them into the loan processing center in Fort Worth. And there's information on those documents that you can pull that information from. If you need help as you're going through the process, we have a 1-800 number you can call. We have an email help desk number. So there's resources out there to help you navigate this process. One thing that I think is I always want to make people aware of is there are local resources to help you as well. So there's in DuPage County, you have the College of DuPage Small Business Development Center. You've got SCORE, which is an all-volunteer organization. These are entities that provide business counseling and mentoring to help you navigate both the application process, but also help you strategize around what do I need to do in the next 2 weeks, 2 months, looking out into the future so that my business is successful in the long term. You can find those entities, those organizations that serve the small business community at the SBA website under local assistance. I'm doing an abbreviated presentation, so if you want more detailed information about how to apply for the SBA economic injury disaster loan, or you'd like to talk to somebody in our office, you can always go to www.sba.gov/IL for more information. We're there to help you navigate this as well, and we're boots on the ground. We live in the community. As Congressman said, I'm in the western suburbs here, and so we're here to serve all of you. As I mentioned, really looking for you to get, if you if you think that this loan program may help you work through the process or work through your business and make sure you have the working capital you need, encouraging you to file as quickly as possible. Make sure you have all the documents we're asking for up front and that you fill out the application completely. The biggest thing that slows people down in getting access to these loans is that they don't provide all the information that we're asking for. Also note that even if you're declined, you have reconsideration rights. So you may be declined, but then there's reasons why you're declined that you can explain to that loan processor. You have the opportunity to go back and basically have your loan reconsidered if that is the case. The other piece that I always want to tell people is if more funds are needed. So say we're looking at 6 months of working capital needs, and as we go through this process, you find that you need more funds for whatever reason, then you can always apply for more through the process. So it's flexible to those needs up to that $2 million limit. And then we have a lot of information on this last slide for those of you that are looking. But we've got a lot of resources here, people you can call, websites you can go to get information. If all else fails and you don't know where else to go, you can call us at the Illinois District at 312-353-4528 or illinois.do@sba.gov. So just wanted to get through that because I think that's really helpful to give you some context for the loan program and how it can help you. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing. And I think we have a bunch of questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Bo. Thank you also to Jessica Mailey, who I know is working behind the scenes here. For any of you who missed that, I think Bo, you said we'll be making the slides available to folks. We also will have this presentation online on our website as soon as we can get it up. So if you want to share this with your colleagues, by all means do it. Anybody who has questions, you've got a little chat bubble. You may have to touch your screen to see it. It'll be either top left or maybe top right, bottom right, but touch it. It'll look like a little cartoon text bubble. If you've got questions, shoot them in there. And someone magical who is socially distanced from all of us right now, I think, is going to start reading questions, and we'll figure out whether myself or Bo is best to take it. But thanks again for doing this, and let us know now what's on your mind.
Hi, this is Jessica. Thanks for the presentation, Bo. One of the questions we got in the chat was, can you talk about other forms of collateral that are accepted beyond real estate?
Sure. So in addition to real estate, we'll also take inventory, heavy equipment, things like that. I think the big takeaway that I want everybody to have, though, is that a lack of collateral is not going to be a reason that you're denied for this program. So, we'll look to be as flexible as we possibly can as we look at your loan proposal and how we underwrite that.
Great. We have another question. Can you get both a $25,000 uncollateralized loan and a collateral loan?
So typically the loans are going to be it's going to be the same loan. So I think what they typically look at is if it's, they'll try to get the $25,000 unsecured dollars dispersed as quickly as possible. And then if there's additional work that needs to happen around the collateralized part of it, then that'll be a second component to that same loan.
If a small business can get a loan from the bank, does that make them ineligible for this SBA loan?
Sure. So when I guess historically, when you went to get a SBA loan, you had to show that you've been denied by a commercial lender. In this case, that's not the case with this program. We look at your financials, basically the financial wherewithal of the business owner or any business owner who's 20% or more an owner to help make that decision of whether credit is available elsewhere. So hopefully that answers your question. Typically, if you do have access to other credit, that would be something that would make you ineligible. However, we're not looking for that, for you to, as a business owner, to go out and be declined before you can actually come to us.
Great. We also got questions from a lot of you submitted when you registered, so thank you for those of you who asked those questions ahead of time. I'll read a couple for the SBA, and then maybe Congressman Casten can answer a couple that were not related to SBA. Bo, is the loan available to newer businesses or only those who have filed tax returns?
Sure. So you don't require showing tax returns. However, what we'll look for is you have to have some history of revenue. So if, you could have 6 months of financials to demonstrate, hey, I had this level of revenue, and then on, January 31st, it dropped off because of the coronavirus. So yeah, you don't have to have the tax returns, but you have to be able to demonstrate through your financial documentation that you, in fact, did suffer some kind of loss, substantial loss.
Great. Yeah, there were some questions as well about how you illustrate those working capital losses. A question in the chat: what if today you don't have that loss, but next week you based on projections versus loss of income? So maybe you can talk a little bit about how the application addresses that.
Sure. So a lot of times, you'll have that kind of leader where your sales kind of demonstrate where your losses are going to be eventually. So a couple ways that you can look as you work with that loan processor to describe your impact is, number one, on sales. So if you saw sales start to fall in February, you may not see that revenue hit until April because of, the way your accounting system and your billing all works. So that's one piece. Another piece would be if you're starting to see your accounts receivable start to increase because of non-payment from your customers. So, I would say if you can project those losses when you're going through the application process, make sure that you articulate what those losses look like and why you believe they're going to be hitting you in the future, so that loan processor can really understand your situation.
Great. Thank you. Congressman Casten, were there any questions that you wanted to take, or would you like us to keep going with the SBA side?
I think I'll defer to you on which questions you see coming in. You got more visibility into what people are asking right now. Whatever seems like a high volume question, let's answer those.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, there was a question about Governor Pritzker's update today. There was mention of low interest with possibility of no repayment. Is that available through SBA?
Sure. Oh, go ahead, Congressman.
No, go ahead, Bo, because I was about to say, if you've got coverage through SBA, go ahead on that.
Yeah, so that's definitely something that's going through the state and some various partners that they've set up within their infrastructure. That's separate and distinct from the SBA program.
The part I was just going to add is that there's still very much in flux federal grants to states, because particularly for places like Illinois that were in a bit of a difficult financial position before, we want to make sure that they've got the resources to provide those programs. And whether that's through Medicaid expansion, I think there's talk of $150 billion to the states to be allocated through some fashion. Hopefully that will provide the resources to provide this and other programs.
Great. Bo, could you explain a little bit, private nonprofits are eligible, but charitable organizations are excluded. Can you talk about what that means?
So, yeah, sure. So the definitions, so we have a document, a standard operating procedure that outlines the specifics of how our program works. And the definition of a charitable nonprofit is fairly limited. So what we're recommending is, if you think that you may have a need for this particular program, that you apply and that you at least put it in, because I think, based on our discussions with the Office of Disaster Assistance, which administers this program, the limitations on ineligible entities is pretty limited. So most nonprofits, even ones that feel like, well, I'm a charitable organization, I take donations, that's not necessarily something that precludes you from accessing this as a resource.
Great. Will a personal guarantee be required for each stakeholder, or will it be based on their ownership percentage?
It's typically based on ownership percentage, and typically that is 20% or more ownership in the business.
A couple questions about different types of businesses being eligible: landscape contractors, auto repair shops. Talk a little bit more about what defines a small business.
Sure. So small business definition is based on whatever industry you're in. And as an example, I mentioned many service companies, their small business standard is $7 million in revenue. But each industry has its own limit. So for example, construction company could be up to $35 million. So we'd have to look specifically to what you do. There's a NAICS code associated to that, North American Industry Code System, and we have a dollar value that defines small for each one of those. So we want to look and see what industry you're in, and we could really tell you accurately what those small business standards are. But just, those businesses, those types of businesses that you listed would certainly be eligible as long as they don't exceed those revenue limits for this program.
Great. And then what's the current turnaround time after documents are submitted?
So what we've been advised to communicate right now is from application to decision is around 21 to 24 days. And then once the decision is made, if approved, then you've probably got about 7 days for closing and disbursement. So you're looking at about 30 days total.
If a business has a manufacturing facility and corporate office in 2 different counties and states, what county do they file for the loan?
They'll file wherever the headquarters office is.
Yes. Can I use the relief funds to pay off my current SBA loan and to acquire working capital to get through this economic downturn?
Sure. So the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program can't be used for refinancing existing debt. It can only be used to pay for the working capital shortfall that you're experiencing. So there are some caveats in there related to gap financing due to the incident, but that's going to be on a case-by-case basis, so I can't give you a general answer for what that might look like.
And then there's a question, can you please define what exactly the loans will be forgiven? I'm not sure if that's a reference to maybe the new stimulus package that might be going through.
Yeah, I can take that. So this is very much in the air. We had negotiated, I'm at a, we spent a lot of time over the last 72 hours working on the House bill. The Senate bill, because the Senate's in session, has now passed, so we're working through this. I would not take anything as a absolutely given at this point, but there were in some early drafts provisions that said that the loans would be convertible to grants in certain circumstances. As of right now, I do not believe that that language will be in this package, but things are very much in flux and moving right now. What I heard right before this call was that there would be scenarios where the loans would be forgivable, but again, that's anecdotal. That was what I heard from folks who had just left the room. So it's possible. Details, we got to wait to see the legislation.
Thanks. There's a comment, I've been trying to submit for a week, but the site is really flaky, and now it's been down all day. are you in the process of adding capacity to make it easier? Bo, can you talk a little bit about the website situation?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for the question. Certainly, the situation has been that the volume of applications has been unprecedented for the SBA anyway. Last night, they took the system down for maintenance to increase that capacity, and I realized that it's been a huge concern to all of you who are trying to apply. My understanding is that the site's back up now, and hopefully you won't experience the same kind of challenges that you've faced over the past week and a half or 2 weeks where you had difficulty uploading documents, the system was slow, that sort of thing. If I could make any kind of recommendation, though, it would be if you are accessing the system, if you access between 7 p.m. and 7 a.m., there seems to be a lot fewer people on the system, so it works a little bit more seamlessly. And likewise, if you're going to call the customer service line in Buffalo, that if you call over the weekend or after 7 p.m., then that's another way that you can get through and not take as much time, much of your valuable time to get what you need.
Great. And we talked about size limits before, but is there a revenue limit for professional practices such as a mental health organization?
I'm sorry, could you say that? Can you ask that question again?
Yeah, sorry. Professional practices such as a mental health organization, is there a revenue limit for that category of small business, or would that be employee-based?
So that would typically be something that would be revenue-based. I don't know what that number is.
Okay.
But we can certainly share a link after this call that can point you to where that information can be found.
Great. If owners have multiple businesses with different TINs, should the ownership submit one application for the entire amount or submit one application for each business that's affected?
Sure. So the guidance that we've received is that if the businesses are in the same industry, so let's say you have 3 restaurants, then you make a single application for all those businesses that you would own. However, if you have multiple businesses in maybe 2 different industries, say you had restaurants, but then you also had a childcare businesses that you owned, then you would file for those separately. I think it's important to note, though, that the $2 million limit is based on the owner. So the limit is on the owner, not on the number of businesses. So even if you had 4 businesses, you're still only eligible for up to $2 million.
Great. This question, the business had a pretty dismal Q4 in 2019. We're slowly clawing our way back to profitability, but the virus thing could be the death knell. Can we still get a loan despite the drop in revenue occurring prior to the virus? Can you kind of explain what the economic injury part of the loan requires?
Sure. So this is, again, one of those unique situations where they would probably want to look at more information, but where you, as the business owner, could talk to, basically communicate what your situation was, where you were going, and why it was kind of a blip just leading up to this particular situation. In the application process, the application form is called an SBA Form 5, and in that documentation, there's a free form entry field where you can actually go in and you can put information like this to explain why things were the way they were and why you need what you need and why you're still being adversely impacted by the coronavirus. So, again, I would encourage you to put your package in, provide the information, but then also get back with, include that ancillary information that you think would be relevant to the decision-making process for that loan processor.
Great. Will applying or receiving an SBA loan preclude us from getting future loans that have forgiveness clauses through the state of Illinois?
I can't really answer that question because I don't know what future loans through the state of Illinois might look like. So, hopefully as we learn more, I think we'll learn more in the coming weeks about these various programs and what the opportunities are around those. What I would say is we'll find out what those legalities or technicalities are. But for now, what I would recommend, what I'm encouraging people to do is go ahead and apply for the economic injury disaster loan. Even if you're approved, you're not required to take it. So there's no application fee. Yes, it'll take your time, which I know is really valuable, but at least then you're in the queue and you're moving towards at least one known resource as other things come available. If you change your mind, it's no problem, no harm, no foul.
Thanks. I'm going to skip to some questions for the Congressman that came in earlier from the event registrations. Can you provide clarity around the impact on business owners if hourly employees file for sick or leave pay? So just some questions around how sick leave is affecting small businesses right now.
Sure. So the first thing, and this is all from the prior package which has passed. There's a distinction between companies with fewer than 500 or more than 500 employees. If you're more than 500 employees, this is treated as a tax credit on your subsequent taxes. If you're fewer than 500, you can apply and get an immediate cash payment for it. The eligible full-time employees get, and depending on where you sit on that line, but same rules generally, eligible full-time employees are entitled up to 2 weeks of paid time off, and then a additional 2 weeks of paid time off at 2/3 of their regular pay. For part-time employees, they're entitled to fully paid time off up to, I think, $511 per day for the typical number of hours that they would typically work in a 2-week period. So you've got to adjust that and go through. And then I believe it's essentially the same formulation if you need more than 2 weeks after the fact, but then the cap is at up to a maximum of $200 a day, consistent with this being roughly a 2/3 test for the extended time off. The idea of the 2 weeks is that because the virus has a 2-week incubation period, if you've been exposed, you may need to self-quarantine. The first 2 weeks covers you for that. If you then become ill, you've got an additional 2 weeks that goes through there, and those are all reimbursed by the federal government.
Thanks. Another question that we had submitted earlier, how long does it take for the economy to recover?
I think that's literally the trillion-dollar question. As it sits right now in the discussions that I've had this week with the Federal Reserve, with Ben Bernanke, former leadership of the Federal Reserve, their view is that at least as of this week, or at least as of yesterday, we've lost $10 trillion of wealth in the United States economy, if you just look at stock market values. But as of today, that is mostly paper wealth. If we had the economy was doing really pretty well before this, unemployment was low, and if we were to tomorrow be at a point where the public health crisis was over, I think the general view of economists is that a lot of that loss in paper wealth would never manifest into anything more than a paper loss because people would get back to work and the fundamentals of the economy are still good. If this sustains for a long period of time, then of course we're going to have, a lot of folks like the folks on this call who are going to be forced to make hard choices, and we then start turning that into real wealth losses. And it's why I said at the start that the single most important thing we can do from a public health perspective and from an economic perspective is to take all these social distancing measures seriously and not overload our health system, because that is the only thing that we have in our collective control to make sure that this downturn is as short as possible. The only countries that have started to see their way out of the back end of this, China, to some degree South Korea, are ones that were about a month ahead of us on really locking down and cauterizing that part of the economy that was trapped. So that's what we're going to have to do. And that's what's going to inform how long the downturn is.
Thanks. Question here, how are you planning to address the shortage of Plaquenil hydroxychloroquine for the thousands of people that need it to work and function? given the fact that it is on back order nationwide as a result of it being touted as a miracle drug for the treatment of COVID-19?
Well, look, I want to stress to everybody, this is, please, please, please do not take this drug out of concern for COVID-19. I think Dr. Fauci had said that, I think he described the work as anecdotal. The one experiment that was cited, and I think it was just irresponsible for the president to cite this, it had 30 patients in it, or maybe 26 patients in it. This was not a heavily controlled experiment. There were 2 studies that were done. One was 26, was inconclusive largely. The one with 30 patients had, I think of the 15 patients who were given the drug, 13 tested negative for coronavirus after a week of treatment. That sounds terrific. The problem was that of the 15 patients who didn't get the drug, 14 tested negative for the virus. So this is not a drug that people should be taking for COVID. It's a sort of interesting, very early result. This is not the kind of result that would pass any robust scientific muster, and I think it's unfortunate that the president talked about it, because we are now going to have problems with delivery on it. But please don't take it prophylactically. Don't go get it unless your doctor advises, and for goodness sake, don't take it for concern about COVID-19.
Thanks. A couple questions into the chat. They wanted to talk about the payroll credits. How do you get reimbursed? Sorry, it's scrolling. How do you get reimbursed for paid time off for a company under 500 employees? And then another question, how will the payroll credits work? Who's to say the employees are being paid because of FMLA versus still working, albeit limited? Obviously, it's up to honesty and ethics, but what will the process be to confirm or deny this?
I'm not sure, Bo, unless you have an answer to that. I don't know exactly how the mechanics of that are going to work, but that in general, what we've been trying to do on the legislative side is to pass bills that then give as much discretion as possible to existing programs, because in order to get the money out there quickly, in speaking with a lot of the folks who were involved in the 2008 crisis, the general guidance we got was that it is vastly more efficient to flex existing programs than to create whole new programs. So I don't want to give misleading information, but I would say check with the relevant agencies, whether that's the taxing authorities, others, and see programmatically where they're at. And I can have our staff look, and we can try to find a more precise answer that we can provide online if we can chase it down.
Thanks. I have another one. If the federal government demands that social distancing shelter in place is to end too early, will state and local governments be able to override and extend as needed?
Well, look, to a significant degree, we are not sheltering in place right now because the federal government has demanded. We're doing it because the state governments have demanded. And to a significant degree, the state governments are not demanding this under threat of martial law. I think Governor Pritzker has said that, if you were to violate these rules, perhaps there's a misdemeanor offense. You're not going to be rounded up and put in jail over it. However, if you were to violate these rules, you might get a lot of people sick. And so I think we are going to depend on all of our fellow neighbors behaving responsibly right now. But the bans, the limitation on service, the impositions on all the public networks that we depend on for those services to be in place, those are really being done at the state level. And fundamentally, they can't be lifted at the federal level. What I think is is at least a more mathematically informed framing of the question, if you will. I'm trying to be respectful of all of the folks I work with, is that 15 days ago, there were 200 confirmed coronavirus cases in the United States. When I went to bed last night, there were 52,000. This is geometrically compounding, and when the president said that he's going to revisit 15 days from now, if 15 days from now we still are at about the same number of cases we are today, we can count that as a massive victory. If, on the other hand, we continue to compound the number of cases at the rate we're going right now, we are going to be in such a different situation that I don't think politically anybody is going to be suggesting that we should be taking our public health measures less seriously 15 days from now. So I think it's a talking point, but I think for all practical purposes, it's not really something that's going to happen unless we've instituted all the appropriate public health measures, and we are doing fine right now, and let's hope we are, but we are not on that trajectory as yet.
Thanks. Another question. I'm paid as a 1099 by my clients. Does that mean I am not eligible for unemployment or financial help from the federal government's coronavirus financial package? Another question. Do you know what the stimulus bill will do for those self-employed and 1099 employees?
So again, it entirely depends on what the final text is from the Senate, but at least the provisions that we were negotiating on the Senate side, I think were broadly consistent with what we're trying to do on the House side. And that unemployment insurance applied not just to W-2 employees, but also to 1099s, to a lot of the gig economy folks, people who were self-employed, people with limited work histories. So all of that unemployment insurance was in fact captured in the language that I saw. Now, do keep in mind that at least as of the start of this call, the primary issue that appeared to be holding up passage in the Senate was a few senators objected to the fact that they felt that the $600 of unemployment insurance plus the amount you were making before might in some cases cause people to make more money if they were unemployed than if they were employed. I question whether that's really the right thing to be focused on right now, but keep in mind that what the final language is, passing this bill out of the Senate right now requires getting clarity on exactly how that unemployment insurance is going to work. So what I just described is what I believe is in the bill before it got held up. Watch the final language, see how that all sits out. But as it sits right now, you should be okay.
Great.
Good. I think sometimes people are unsure of if I'm a sole proprietor, can I apply for an economic injury disaster loan? I think about, there may be people that, hey, I'm an electrician and I just run my own business. I have costs related to my van. I have costs related to supplies, things like that. Can I apply for an economic injury disaster loan? The answer is yes. If you're seeing impact from the coronavirus and you're not able to do a lot of things that you need to do as part of your business, you in fact absolutely can apply for the EIDL program.
Thanks, Bo. Two questions about insurance companies for the Congressman. Our insurance company has indicated they are receiving pressure for paying out on business interruption claims. Is there any update on this? And then another question, Sean, what is the government doing to regulate how insurance companies are processing claims denials?
So with respect to the business interruption, I'm aware that people are asking the question. I think at some degree we've got to acknowledge that this is a math problem. Remember what I was saying, that the scale of disruption in the economy is of a scale that the only entity that really has the balance sheet to do it is the federal government, and even that will require a significant increase in federal borrowing. I am sure that there will be a lot of insurance companies processing claims for a long time. Certainly from my own days running a small business, I am keenly aware that you look at those force majeure provisions and try to see, wait a minute, who holds the liability when my subcontractor didn't show up because they had force majeure protection, and who's got the business interruption risk. But I think just purely from a size of the claim to the industry, I think if the insurance industry was to be held responsible for the business interruption claims that are out there, we would probably bankrupt the insurance industry. I'm not saying that as a cheerleader for the insurance industry. I'm just saying that's the scale of the numbers we're talking about. I'm sure there will be exceptions. There will be some points around the corners, but I think in general, we're going to have to find some way to do this federally, and it'll depend on what our appetite is for long-term borrowing and how big a federal program we put in place.
Thanks. Just reading our last couple questions here. We got about 10 minutes left in the chat. How about the business real estate taxes? Are we going to have some relief from that?
Is that a state tax you're referring to, or?
Maybe.
That may be a Governor Pritzker question. I'm not sure. I do know that the governor just announced that that Illinois taxes are now deferred to be payable on July 15th. So there's at least some temporal waivers on some of the state income taxes. As to business real estate taxes, I don't know off the top of my head what the state is doing on those.
Okay. Yeah, just going back through some of our other submitted questions.
Just if I could, somebody asked the difference between I think they're referring to the SBA Form 5 and the SBA Form 5C. One is for sole proprietors, and the other one's for other business structures. So I saw that come through, and I think that's what they were referring to. Let's see. Another question I just want to reinforce is SBA, the economic injury loans are done directly by SBA. So unlike our more conventional SBA loans, which are done through commercial lenders, you do the deal is processed and serviced through SBA with funds from the Treasury. You don't have to have any loans with SBA currently or anything like that. That does not apply. So it's a direct loan program. So I just wanted to clarify that too, because I saw a couple questions that kind of came in from outside. Another question that came up, and I just wanted to reinforce, is some businesses asked what resources are available to cover payroll during this shelter-in-place period. Again, that's one of the purposes for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, as well as I think some of the recent programs that came out today from the state. That's what they're in place for, is to help businesses be able to pay their employees, their benefits, other fixed costs associated to running that business.
One of the other points that's worth adding on the question about picking up for gaps in payroll and is this extended long enough, is that both the Senate and the House versions have included direct payments. I believe the version on the Senate side was a payment of $1,200 for adults and $500 for children. Again, not final. There are some mechanical questions about will that be paid to everybody? Will it only be paid to lower income folks? If it's paid to lower income folks, how do we test that in a way that doesn't frustrate the efficiency of getting the cash into the market? But certainly for folks who are independent, self-employed, for employers who are thinking about, how do I make sure that my employees are covered for some longer period of time? There will be some additional federal assistance on that. Size, duration, still to be determined, but somewhere in the vicinity of the numbers I just described to you.
That's great. We're running out of time, but there was a question I wanted you to address, Bo. It says, do we have to submit separate applications for the EIDL loans and the Corona disaster loans? I just want you to clarify that that's the same program.
Right. So what we're talking about right now is the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, which is covering the coronavirus disaster that we're experiencing right now. Again, I think there may be other resources available via legislation, but what is currently available is for the coronavirus disaster.
Great. Thanks. You guys want to both wrap up?
I would Jessica, thank you again for your help on this. Bo, thank you. Would remind everybody, if you joined in late, if you missed some of the start, this program was recorded. We will make it available online. Feel free to share. We are going to try to do some more of these. Hopefully we'll have some legislation coming out soon. and can speak with a little bit more detail on what happens in the Senate negotiation. And also, we're well aware that I think we overloaded the lines on this one before we got to everybody who wanted to participate. So if you've got some colleagues, some friends, some other business owners who want to participate next time, let them know that we're going to try to do these again shortly. And I hope we're fortunate enough to have Bo join us again. Really appreciate having you as a resource.
Thanks, Congressman. It's a pleasure for us to join, and appreciate the opportunity. So hope everybody's well, and keep plugging away. We appreciate everything you do for our country and our economy.
And wash your hands.
That's right.
Thanks all. Stay safe.
All right. Thank you.